Hello, and welcome back to Shining from Within, the podcast where we explore the infinite amount of power and potential that lies within each and every one of us. I am your host with the most, Genevieve, and today I have a very interesting topic. Today we're going to navigate the paradox of hope. What do I mean by the paradox of hope? Have you ever heard people say hope can be devastating? So let's unpack this, right? Just walk with me. So imagine you are facing a challenging situation, let's say difficult illness, maybe a strained relationship or a challenging, course in school. I think those are very relatable situations. In moments like those, you find hope emerges as a guiding light, where it offers solace and light, and possibility. However, there's always like a fine line, between constructive optimism and, realistic expectations. I think one of the valuable lessons we can learn from the paradox of hope is, the importance of realism. While hope can motivate us to persevere through adversity, it's very essential to maintain a clear-eyed view of the situation. Blind optimism can sometimes lead to denial of harsh realities, and it also leads to prolonged suffering, which also in turn prevents us from making informed decisions. Like I mentioned, you could be suffering from an illness. While we acknowledge that having optimism is very key and vital in your healing, it's also important to look at the facts on the ground, not just a disease, let's say a strained relationship. I think this one is very relatable. Maybe every one of us have had that situation where you are into someone, you love them, and of course maybe you have like a scoreboard where you tick, and you're able to tick almost everything, but there are a few things that you're like, maybe I can overlook this because nobody's perfect, and maybe this person will show up for you the way you show up for them. Sometimes it's okay to look at things for what they truly are. This person may never show up for you the way you show up for them. They don't view you with the same measure of importance, and it's fine to accept such painful realities, opposed to burying your head in the sand and saying, no, this person's gonna change. People don't change because we want them to change. People change when they decide to change. So when we talk about hope can be devastating, I think this side of hope is where you fail to acknowledge the facts on the ground, which is very devastating, because then it's like you're driving with your eyes closed. That's very dangerous. That's a very dangerous way of living. You're just hoping like, okay, so I'm not driving that fast, but I'll close my eyes because I believe I'll get through this journey. You end up hitting into a pothole, or you end up hitting into someone. And what I'm trying to drive at is that eventually such decisions lead to hurt. Somebody's going to get hurt, and most likely it's going to be you, especially in that situation where you have to make a strong decision, painful, but an informed decision, So I think another lesson I would like to highlight, it lies in resilience. Despite the potential for disappointment, hope fuels our resilience in the face of setbacks. It teaches us to bounce back from failure, or, adapting to new circumstances and finding alternative paths. So I'm not saying hope is all bad. No. It's got two sides. It depends on how you perceive it or how you interpret it. I'm sure we've all seen that post. It's all about perception. So it's not about avoiding disappointment altogether, but rather embracing it as part of the journey towards growth and fulfillment. Furthermore, the paradox of hope highlights the power of acceptance. Sometimes the most hopeful act is to accept things as they are. You just let things unfold as they are. You, like that point where I talked about, where you don't want to accept things. Let go of the unrealistic expectations and find peace in the present moment. This doesn't mean giving up hope entirely, but rather shifting our focus from what could be to what is within our control. So I feel like the ultimate lesson is about finding balance, balance hope. You can embrace both the light and its shadow. It's about cultivating a resilient spirit that can weather the storms of uncertainty while remaining grounded to reality. So like I mentioned, hope has two sides. So I wanted to bring to your attention the devastating side of hope, or the shadow in the light of hope. So it's very important to acknowledge things for what they truly are. And you find a balance. Stay grounded. Don't bury your head in the sand. I think at some point I used to be that way, where I didn't want to accept what was on the ground. There was a time when I went through a phase where when things wouldn't go right, I wouldn't even acknowledge that things are going bad. I would be like, no. And that saved me in a lot of situations. But hindsight, I think it's very important to acknowledge situations as they are. And of course, you have that optimistic lens where you're like, okay, so this is how I want this to be, or this was how it was meant to be in my head. But have your feet on the ground firmly, where you're able to see and say like, okay, so this is what is actually on the ground, opposed to having blind optimism. So dear listeners, thank you for joining me on exploring, the different aspects of hope. And I hope it, sharpens your artillery or your knowledge on hope. Thank you for tuning in.